thing on? Okay. So I'm Neil Fujii with the Commission on Water Resource Management. I work in the planning branch there. And we're going to give a quick kind of overview of the Water Commission, like who we are, what we do, and hopefully what our kind of tie-in is with the other agencies here a little bit. I'm going to go through this really quickly, and if we have time, I have another presentation, sorry, right after lunch, talk about like water audits and getting into a little bit of more of the details. So next slide, please. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is basically who the commission is, some of our program areas, what we do to manage and water in Hawaii, a little bit about interagency coordination, and then go over. Carolyn asked me to talk about some goals, so hopefully these are our goals. Deputies here to confirm or not, but and then yeah, so that's kind of overview. Next slide. Okay, so you guys have all seen this satellite picture of Hawaii and how isolated we are in the middle of the Pacific. So really this is just a reminder about how important our fresh water is in Hawaii. And you know, as you guys all know, all of our fresh water, natural fresh water, comes from rainfall, precipitation. So something to remember. Next slide. Okay, you guys have seen this. This is kind of the hydrologic cycle. For those of you who don't know, you know, on an island setting in the ocean, you know, we have the rainfall that recharges our groundwater. The fresh water is less dense than the salt water, so it floats. So that's why we're lucky for that. We have fresh water. So we have this freshwater lens, and we have different types of aquifers containing fresh water. And so in the ground, that's what the wells and tunnels are dug for to develop this water for the use for humans. Next slide. And this is just another depiction, but on next slide, please. I should have just put one, but this is a cool one. USGS did some translation into the Hawaiian language, so which is kind of interesting. Anyway, again, very kind of different sources of fresh water, not sources, but different places where we find fresh water in Hawaii. Okay, next slide. Okay, so thank you. Who are the commission? So the commission is a commission of 7 members, and it's an agency. So much like, I guess, the PUC and other agencies, they have a board or a commission with the staff. So that's who we are. The 1978 Constitutional Convention, they had an amendment that established the Water Commission in the constitutional amendment. About 9 years later, the legislature passed the state water code. We have a 7-member commission currently, along with the deputy director, and last count was 21 staff. We administer the state water code and the administrative rules. We regulate all waters of the state, pretty much the fresh water, which includes all of the, we're talking about the drinking water system, so all of the private and publicly owned systems. And then I think, as Joy and others pointed out, think water quantity as far as what the commission manages, and for DOH is water quality. Did I say that right? Yeah, we do quantity, they do quality in general. Next slide. Okay, so I talked about the 7 members here. Here they are. Out of the 7 members, we currently have 1 vacancy, and then 2 of the commissioners are going to term out at the end of this fiscal year. So we'll have 3 vacancies. So if anyone wants to apply, put your name in. 1 member must have substantial experience, expertise in a traditional Hawaiian water resource management, the LOEA. How to pronounce it? Yeah. And that's the current vacant position. Next slide. Okay, this is our mission and vision statement. I won't read it, but you know the idea is to make sure we have enough water currently for current uses, all uses, and also for future uses for future generations. Next slide. Oh, this is just a reminder that the commission has its own section in the Constitution, I think, so which established a water resources agency, which is the Water Commission. Next slide. Okay, so kind of had to throw a water loss slide in here. So not only is the commission have authority through the Hawaii Constitution and the state water code and our administrative rules, there's also a number of case law decisions or rulings by the Hawaii Supreme Court has shaped our policies and the way we have to manage water in Hawaii. These are just some of them. I can't, well, next slide. I'm not a lawyer, so. All right, so part of our, I guess, policy or how we manage water is we must respect the public trust doctrine. So these are two sections from different sections of the Constitution. So the first one on the top is, I think, from Section 1, Article 11, kind of establishes the public trust. And then the second quotation there is from what I showed you earlier, which is Section 7. Just a reminder there. So again, public trust, you know, nobody owns the water in Hawaii. The state is the trustee, or our responsibility is to manage that water for the betterment of all the people in Hawaii. Next slide. Okay, so there are 4 or 5, let's call it 5 public trust purposes. These are all established, by the way, through Supreme Court, Hawaii Supreme Court decisions or rulings, pretty much. But they're there, so they don't exist in the state water code or the admin rules or the Constitution. But over the years and through legal decisions, this is what we have. So these are the public trust purposes. There's no priority among these 4 or 5, and it's kind of a case by case thing. Next slide. Okay, so it also brings us to not only protection of the public trust purposes, but also, you know, we need to use the water, right, in this modern society. So we have this balancing act between protection and reasonable and beneficial uses. And there's a whole little, what is this, subsection in the code, subsection, yeah, thank you, which just talks about all the different, what they call beneficial uses, adequate protection of these things, and certain things are declared in the public interest. So kind of a lot in there and a lot to interpret. But it's kind of demonstrates like our job to balance both the protection of the water for certain public trust purposes and other protections, and then also reasonable and beneficial uses, which includes, you know, drinking water systems, right? Next slide. Oh, okay, this is just more balance. I think some of these quotations are from Supreme Court decisions. I borrowed this presentation and tweaked it a bit, so, but yeah, I believe that's what these are from. So this is just to kind of demonstrate what the courts have said about you know, balancing and looking at certain uses. So this one, the first one is the court says that we have to look at the public trust purposes before other types of uses. Next slide. Okay, so yeah, thanks. So this is our org chart and kind of what we include in briefings to like our commissioners and legislature. But we have 4 branches. We have Our commission there at the top, the 7-member commission. It's debatable whether or not we are under DLNR or attached, but I think we're under DLNR. Some people think not. But we have, and our deputy is just deputy for the water commission. So we have another deputy at the DLNR who's the deputy of all the other divisions. And then we have our staff. So let's see. Yeah, we don't have to get all into this, but 4 branches. I'll talk about the programs and what they do on the next few slides. Next slide. Oh, this is just kind of what, like I said, we do these briefings. Talks about some of our budget. Our operating funds is about 4 million, and we have CIP about 2 million a year. That's mainly for like deep monitor well design and construction. The resources, I have a couple of slides on this, but there's 376 perennial streams, 110 aquifer systems. There's about 5,500 wells that were drilled that we know of in the state. Not all of them are active, obviously. And then about 1,300 stream diversions that we must manage. Next slide. Okay, so again, these are just, there's going to be some repetition, but planning branch, which I'm in the planning branch. The main thing we do is the Hawaii update, the Hawaii water plan, and I have a slide on that. I'll explain a little bit more. And doing other plans for protection and conservation of resources. Then we have our groundwater regulation branch. Their function is to permit a lot of these, basically groundwater permits. So wells, well pumps, water use permits. Looking at also monitors aquifer health. That threw me off. Okay, so and then I have a little bit more on these. Our stream protection and management branch. They do a lot to protect our streams through issuing in-stream, interim in-stream flow standards, do a lot of monitoring. Also, they do stream permits, and they also do establish in-stream flow standards. And then our survey branch, Mel talked a little bit about them working with DOH folks, but they do a lot of the data collection, mostly on groundwater. Our stream protection branch kind of does their own monitoring, but survey branch is super important in keeping track of the health of our aquifers. Next slide. Okay, so more repetition. So planning, we do implement the state water code through the long range planning. So we have some of these components of the Hawaii water plan. And then, we do other things like water conservation and drought planning. We also do the water audits. I have another presentation on that. Let's see, next slide. Okay, so the Hawaii water plan is not really a plan, but it's a collection of plans. So we refer to it as the Hawaii water plan, but there's 8 main components. Up at the top are like the state plan. So water resource protection plan is prepared by the Water Commission, and then the water quality plan is prepared by the Department of Health. And these are the 2 plans that set the protection policies for water in the state of Hawaii on the quantity side and the quality side. And then the second tier here is kind of trying to look at the state needs through all state water projects across the state. So it could be University of Hawaii, DAGS, DOE, trying to get a good idea of what these state water use demands are into the future. And then we have the agricultural side. So agricultural water use and development plan. And that one tries to look at agricultural needs and rehabilitation needs for agricultural irrigation systems across the state. And all of this, from those 4 dark blue plans kind of feed into the county water use and development plans. And these plans are developed by the counties. They want to look at what their current and future demands are, what the strategies are to provide supply to meet these demands across the county. And they also have to be consistent with the land use plans and policies in that county and the state. And we have actually, so each county does a water use and development plan. Honolulu is a little bit different. They do like watershed management plans. They have 8 of them, I think. And then Maui's doing one for. They did one for Maui Island, and they're going to do one for Molokai, and possibly Lanai in the future. And then the Big Island is actually going to look at. They did an island-wide plan, but they're going to look at specifically the Keauhou, Kona plan, and then also a Waimea plan. Next slide, please. Okay, so the groundwater regulation. These are just some maps. This is like of the Molokai aquifers or aquifer system areas, the different sustainable yields. And then the other map there is just all of the different production wells on Oahu, color-coded. It's kind of small. But the important thing is there's a lot of aquifers statewide. And this, 3,557 million gallons a year, or million gallons a day of sustainable yield across the state, which is distributed among the different islands. But it's a lot of water to manage. Next slide, please.
Neil,
Yes.
couple questions, Neil. You use the phrase sustainable yield. Could you explain what that meant?
Yeah, I have another slide on that.
Okay.
But it's Mac. I have a slide that's got the
Okay.
water code definition on there.
And then there was a question also of how are groundwater recharge rates in Hawaii impacted by climate change? Also, have recharge rates been measurably impacted by development and or increase in certain invasive species in Hawaii?
So the first question, we are seeing the rainfall, a trend of drying rainfall trend over the past century, which really does impact the recharge. So I would say there's a drying trend, and probably the recharge is probably going down if you compare it with the past 100 years of rainfall. And then the second question about invasive species impacting recharge, that's a good question. I mean, it's kind of a changing land use, from, let's say, native forest to invaded forest. I'm not sure. I think any forest is better than none, but whether or not the natives capture more water than the invasives, I think that's getting looked into. I think some folks would say the natives are better, but I don't know. I know there's certain invasive species that they transpire more water under the ground, so that's bad. Certain species, I don't know. That answer the question?
Yep, there was one more. Do the seaworm commissioners have other day jobs?
Oh yeah, some of them do. They're all volunteer. They don't get paid. They get per diem and travel paid for, but they're all volunteers, and some of them have day jobs.
Thank you.
Good question. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is just switching to, not switching to. This is another slide. It's hard to see, but we talk about the wells. It's kind of repetitive. But groundwater does have their permitting program, so they permit wells, pumps, and water use permits, among other things. Next slide. Okay, this is next couple slides on our SPAM, or Stream Protection and Management branch. Yeah, we call them SPAM. Oh, we do. There's a SPAM branch. So, a lot of streams across the state, 376. The in-stream flow standards are being developed, or interim in-stream flow standards, and through what they call IFSAR, in-stream flow standard assessment reports, right? Okay, so those are pretty detailed reports looking at all aspects of stream flow, the habitat, and looking at the different, and the water code kind of dictates what you need to look at to establish in-stream flow standards. So, and then again, stream permitting, they have stream channel alteration permits, stream diversion works permits, petition to amend in-stream flow standards, among other. Those are the main ones. Next slide. Okay, so again, this is kind of more details, but they do a lot of, I mentioned the stream branch, the SPRAM branch does their own kind of monitoring, and then our survey branch focuses mainly on groundwater. So, we have like 82 monitoring sites that increases every few months, probably every year. They look at stream and ditch flows, also do biological assessments, and then we have this big cooperative agreement with USGS, and they help us basically monitor 47 stream gauges and 9 observation wells and 18 rain gauges. Let's see, next slide. Yes. Yes.
Oh, no. When it comes to stream protection and management, when someone wants to restore an OY system, what does that look like? Is there a lot of red tape with that, or because I'm from Maui, so of course we have Navai Eha, Keanai, all our traditional communities. So just curious.
Oh, I'm glad you asked. Dean, can you help answer that? Give him the microphone.
So typically it's just applying for a stream diversion works permit. And then we generally work with them, the applicants, to address any concerns that they may have. So a lot of times with ROIs, especially, it's, if it's been so long that the ROI has been used, it's a matter of restoring it to some degree, possibly moving the intake location. And then sometimes if it was registered in the past, if it was registered and it fell out of use, then it's an easier hurdle to overcome. Yeah.
More in the back.
Go ahead.
How often are new major diversions proposed and approved? Dean. How often are new major diversions proposed and approved?
Not very often. It's really rare that we get large diversions, and generally if someone's proposing like a irrigation plantation type diversion, it's not going to get approved, just because of the environmental impacts that we see nowadays. So typically it's usually just small pipes, 2 to 4 inches max, or they're small pumps.
As a follow-up to that, so how do developers manage that limitation then? Like if they're kind of trying to build in a new area and it would require a high flow, like are they having to tap into existing diversions even if it's a new area?
Yeah. So generally developers aren't looking at surface water for the most part. They're generally tying into the either existing infrastructure, and usually water supply departments, municipal purveyors or private purveyors on the other hand. But yeah, so typically they're mostly looking at groundwater sources for developments.
Thanks, Dean. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So next branch, survey branch. Survey branches really are like data collection, like I mentioned. Again, mainly groundwater, but they do a lot of monitoring and analysis of groundwater withdrawals, water levels. They look at the vertical profiles within deep monitor wells to look at the aquifer health, going through from freshwater through brackish water through the salt water, and seeing how that water is moving throughout this water column, and that gives you an idea of the health of the aquifer, right? Let's see, and then we do collaborate with a bunch of other federal and state agencies, and just most recently with Mel's crew coming on and helping us, so we appreciate that. That's a good one. And then really important is the deep monitor well program that is kind of administered through our survey branch as well as our groundwater management branch. But we have a number of deep monitor wells across the state, and we try to program at least one funding for one new well every fiscal year, which is about roughly 2 million for design and construction. They're very expensive because you got to go really deep into the ground and down through the saltwater column, which is very deep. Let's see. This is just hard to see, but that's kind of like how the deep monitor wells, they go all the way into the salt water, and then we can monitor the health of the aquifer by looking at how that water column or the different layers are moving in the aquifer. Next slide. And another really important function of our survey branch is, you know, getting reports, monthly reports of water use from all well owners and operators and stream diversion owners and operators. So, you know, this is a kind of an ongoing thing where we developed an online reporting system several years ago, which is really helpful. So before it was they would either mail it in or fax it in, sometimes email, but yeah, fact, we still got a fax machine. So in fact, we still, I think, get monthly water use faxed in. So, but the online reporting has helped a lot. And then before it was like manual input, it still is somewhat, but the online system has really helped. And then you know, we're still trying to catch up with the surface water users. For surface water reporting, it's really difficult. It's hard to measure, you know, surface water, open channel flows, right? For your wells, most people have a meter, and that's pretty straightforward. But to measure your diversion off the stream, a lot of times it's not super straightforward. So that's part of the reason. But we're catching up with that. And then we have really focused on all of the large users and users in water management areas. So like all of the pretty much drinking water systems, they're all 100% compliant. So for the groundwater, and then for surface water, I think they're catching up. So again, we're focusing on like really big users and users in the designated water management areas, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Yeah, and then we're also looking at, you know, doing more enforcement for what do you call these? I guess folks that are not reporting every month. Oh, next slide. Okay, so we talked about deep monitor wells, and we kind of have some priorities where we kind of call them like hotspots or areas that we need more information in. So this is those red areas across on the different islands that we're planning on putting some deep monitor wells in. And depending on the situation, these priorities might change. So just to kind of give you an idea, all of the black and the black dots are the other deep monitor wells, which there's a bunch on Oahu, but as you can see on a lot of the neighbor islands, there's a lot of missing, or we don't have information going deep into the aquifer. So that's super important. We're trying to catch up with that, or at least get more data. Next slide. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit more about designated water management areas in a couple of slides, but this is, since we've been talking about it, this is what it looks like. So we have ground and surface water designated water management areas. So everything you see it's hard to see maybe from far, but the hatched ones are the surface water management areas. And then all the blue shaded, oh, here we go. So this is the surface water, and the blue is the groundwater management. So entire island of Molokai, most of Oahu, soon to be all of Oahu, because we had received a petition to designate Waianae as a water management area, groundwater management area. And then you can see for Maui, it's pretty much the Iao aquifer system for the groundwater, and then the Navaeha area of surface water, and then it's pretty much all of Lahaina ground and surface water, which was recently designated. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, should I go back one? Okay, water management and permitting. Okay, thank you. So this is like next few slides on how we manage the water and do permitting. So, okay, so we manage groundwater by sustainable yield. So it's basically, if you hit the advance, please. Okay, so someone asked what sustainable yield means, and this is the current definition in the water code. You know, it means the maximum rate at which water may be withdrawn from a water source without impairing the utility or quality of this water source as determined by the commission. So it seems to be, you know, gives a lot of discretion to the commission on what doesn't, you know, constitute the impairment of water quality. So, but this is the definition we're going by. Every aquifer system in the state has a sustainable yield, and basically, a sustainable yield is how much water you can pump out of the aquifer itself without impairing the quality of the water, and that's been established by the commission in the Water Resource Protection Plan. But that's how we manage groundwater by aquifer system and withdrawals. Next slide. Should we answer a question now or later? Seeing all kind of questions.
I attempted to answer one of them, and I did indicate to Robert if he's online if he wanted to address. But the first one was reports on water usage, 100% reliable, accurate, and how do you ensure it? I did talk about meters and how they are submitted, but if additional.
Oh, so the question like, how do we know that the reporting? Oh, okay. Actually, we don't. But for like groundwater, if the well owner operator has a water meter, a flow meter on their well, the assumption that it's accurate, we don't know of too many people that test their meters, right, or replace their meters. So that's like a future project. But right now, as far as we know, you know, there's no testing requirements from the commission. From time to time, you know, our staff might be out in the field. They might go take a look at, you know, well meters, but there's no like testing program right now.
The next question was no surface water management in Kohala.
Nope.
And then the last question is, are there any regions in Hawaii that are drawing groundwater beyond the sustainable yield of the water source and aquifer? And I just answered yes.
What was the last part?
Is there any locations that are drawing beyond the sustainable yield?
There shouldn't be.
Isn't
there might be some.
Isn't West Maui still above?
No.
Not anymore.
Above? There's some that are probably close. I don't have the data right here.
Robert's saying yes.
Oh, okay. Well, Robert, if that's Robert from our office, he knows best. So, okay then, yeah. So yeah, but hopefully not by too much.
And so what happens, what do you do when this happens? Then you potentially become a designated management area. Is that correct?
I think the areas that Robert's talking about might already be water management areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they already probably are designated. In an undesignated area, that would be a criteria for designation for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. No, thanks. Thanks for the difficult question. Okay, so in-stream flow standards, like, is this true, Dean? We're managing surface water. The in-stream flow standards are kind of like an analog to sustainable yield. Would that be okay? So that's kind of like when the commission established interim in-stream flow standards. It's kind of like, okay, this is how much water that has to stay in the stream for all of these different purposes, right? So when I mentioned those in-stream flow standard assessment reports, they're pretty extensive, and our staff basically looks at all of these different factors, and this is the water code requires us. So you got to look at, everything besides hydrology, the fish and wildlife habitat, recreation, navigation, Hawaiian rights. Someone asked about that. And then also we need to look at non-instream or off-stream uses, like, and one of them is, what's present versus potential and what are those economic impacts. So very extensive study. And sometimes we might have to adjust this, right, Dean? Depending on, changing conditions like climate. Anyway, so this is how we manage surface water, sorry, streams. Next slide, please. Yes. Get ready.
Sorry, I might have random questions.
It's okay.
But in regards to fish, wildlife habitat, and recreation, and once again, I'm going to circle back to Maui. It might be a Dean question. Just because a couple of years ago, in regards to like estuaries and mulivais and things like that, because diversion of water is so huge on Maui, where I don't know if you all remember seeing this at Kealia Pond. Well, you may not be familiar, but there was a hot pink pond on Maui a few years back, and that was directly due to the diversion of water. And so what do you all do? What's your responsibility when you see major things such as that? And then on your slide, you had an o'opu, which is a freshwater fish. They're dying out like crazy. Our mulivais are all dried up. So those are direct impacts from diversion. So what's your responsibility when you see these impacts live happening? Do you address it right away, or?
The pond turning pink is a water quality issue, so let me defer to DOH.
Okay, I think it's a combination of all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, no. Seriously. So the reason why we came up with this diagram is because so the span branch was born out of Waihole. So it's relatively young as far as the commission goes, but a lot of people are asking us what took us so long. So the blue boxes, the light blue boxes, are basically what the code prescribes that we need to look at. The red box is what we need to weigh it against, right? And that too is prescribed by the code. The thing that everyone forgets is the hydrology portion, which for the majority of streams in Hawaii, we don't have information. So that's why that's a super important part. But even within each of these boxes, there's things to consider. So, when we're working with our aquatic resources division, they're telling us, well, you got to look at everything like stream channelizations, because that's going to impact habitat, vertebrates versus invertebrates, invasive species, you have damselflies, recruitment, all that kind of thing, right? So it's a lot of complicated information that we gotta look at and weigh. In the case of Kealia Pond, I think once Waikapu stream was restored, there was more underground flow because it's a losing stretch, so more water was popping up at the coast. So I think that addressed the problem there. And then the other one was, oh yeah. So I'm actually not aware of any major OPU die-offs. The one that we did have was when we installed a fish ladder on Wailuku River, and the issue we had there is looking, hindsight 2020. And this had been a common practice where whenever EMI needed to work on the ditch system for Spreco's ditch, Wailuku Water Company would turn off the water at the higher level. So that's what we decided to do when we're installing the fish ladder, because that was the easiest way to do it. That caused a die-off because we basically cut off this water in the lower reaches, right? So we haven't really seen any die-offs lately, naturally caused. Typically, if it's declining stream flows, the fish are able to adjust. But that's always going to happen if you have a drought situation. So yeah, hopefully, we work towards stream restoration that addresses that.
Thanks, Dean. Next slide. Okay. Oh, should I go back one? Yeah, this is, again, since I gave the sustainable yield definition, there's this in-stream flow standard definition in the water code. Quality of flow of water or depth of water, which is required to be present at a specific location in a stream system at certain specified times of the year to protect these things: fishery, wildlife, recreational, aesthetic, scenic, and other beneficial in-stream uses. So it's kind of like minimum what needs to be in the stream at these certain times. Okay, next slide. Okay. Where are we? Oh, okay. Another slide. What? I'm not sure why this is here, but this is a reminder of where the designated water management areas are. And oh, I know what it was. Okay, so okay, the next slide is going to talk about it. But so we have different regulation in designated water management areas and non-designated water management areas slightly. And next slide. Okay, it's not this one. Anyway, so there's permitting. So statewide. Oh yeah, this is it. So statewide is well construction pump installation permits apply statewide. All stream diversion works, stream channel alteration permits, and petitions to amend in-stream flow standards apply statewide, whether you're within or outside a water management area. And next slide. Okay, so in designated water management areas, there's an additional permit that needs to be applied for to use the water, and they're called water use permits, which the commission will issue an allocation or amount of water that you can withdraw. So besides, let's say you got a well permit and a pump installation permit, well, you need to get a water use permit to give you an allocation of how much you can actually take out of your well or withdraw from the ground. Yeah, these are designated areas only. They're, we need to review them every 20 years or so. And it's a very detailed analysis as far as, when staff receive the application and looks at it, and there's a lot more information that the applicant has to provide. Next slide. Okay, so emerging issues and topics. Oh yeah, okay, so these are kind of like some of the important things that have come before the commission currently that we're working on. The Lahaina designation, everyone knows about that. So, the designation occurred in 2022, and staff received a lot of water use permit applications, a bunch of them. Many of them have not been completed or complete, right? So we're still working with the applicants to submit the required information, and that's taking a little bit. Are we still prioritizing Mauna Kauai? Okay, well, that's a maybe, but we are prioritizing Lahaina. Okay, next slide. Oh yeah, so nobody talked about this one. This is Kapaka'i analysis, and this came out of a Supreme Court case in 2001, 2000. Yeah, and then so really it's kind of in a nutshell, I guess. It's a requirement for state and county agencies to conduct these Kapaka'i analyses to protect traditional and customary practices. It's usually it's evolving, but usually the applicant would conduct the Kapaka'i analysis, and it's a burden of the agency, the state or county agency who's taking the action, like a permit, to, we must make sure that they're doing it right. We're going to assess it and look at their findings and determinations. It's a requirement of all C1 permits. Okay, got the nod there. And then, we are, because this is a kind of new thing for the commission, we are in the process of kind of creating some guidance and guidelines based on what's happened in other Kapaka'i analyses across the state. Next slide. Not well. One commissioner is required to be a lawyer. Not necessarily. We have a Ahamoku council and Ahamoku executive director, which are kind of supposed to be the liaison between the DLNR, the agency, and the practitioners on the ground. So there's that kind of network, but we haven't I mean, we're still working that process out right now, and we haven't really figured that out. But anything to add?
Hello. Um, now I think it's on. Yeah. So hi, I'm Kira Kahohane. I'm the Deputy Director for the Commission on Water Resource Management. Yeah, that's a really good question because, how are we making sure that we're carrying out the Kapa'akai analysis faithfully if we don't have someone who's able to independently verify that the analysis was done well? How do we have an idea of what practices are out there in general? It, like Neil said, is definitely something that is evolving, that we need to figure out a process to do better. At present, staff does their best to check online resources like the Kipuka database that's maintained by OHA, sources like that to verify at least whether there are any traditional and customary practices present in the area. People have actually been going out and contracting out a lot of their Kapa'akai analyses lately to consultants who tend to do a pretty good job and can prepare a more robust analysis for people. But as for how staff verifies that the minimum has been met, it's still something that we're trying to figure out, where that knowledge should be within our agency. And it is something that the commissioners themselves help with. It's something that Ahamoku helps us with. But there's definitely room for improvement in that process.
Thanks, Kira. Yeah, it's a good question. So let's go over the framework. So the Hawaii Supreme Court kind of laid out in their ruling or opinion, I guess, is kind of on this what they call Kapa'akai analysis framework. So what the agency or the applicant / agency has to look at when there's a project is, okay, they need to identify what the valued cultural, historical, natural resources are in that area, and including the extent which traditional and customary Hawaiian rights are exercised. So someone has to go and look in the area. What are the practices or values in the area, right? That's number one. Second, how are these going to be impacted by the project, right? So the extent of these resources will be affected. What are the impacts? Is this project going to affect the practices in the area that you've identified, right? And then number three, if there are impacts, what's the feasible action, right, if any, that can be taken? This one says Land Use Commission, but that would apply. This is this specific case, but that would apply to any state or county agency, I believe. What can be what's the feasible action that can be taken either by the agency or the applicant to reasonably protect these rights if they're found to exist? So number one, what practices are in the area of your project? Number two, are there any impacts does your project have any impacts on these practices? And number three, if so, what can you do to mitigate or protect that? So hello, Joy.
We did have a person with their hand raised. I will defer to that for 1 second. If you could take yourself off mic or maybe chat. There you go.
Aloha, Dean Kapuni Harvest. I am an employee of PUC, but I am a practitioner of the Hawaiian culture. Now, my question is, what you're saying here, have you folks even thought out any of the kupuna in the areas that you go to do these projects at? Because they would be able to at least give you a little bit of guidance. I have found many times as a practitioner that when researching, you try and look for the longest line of life that has been there for generations, and many generations do stay in the same area. So the stories, the mo'olelo would be passed down, or they might remember. Have you folks thought about doing something like that?
1, 2. Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, so good question. And so some of the Kapa'akai analyses that have come in with some of these permits, like Kira mentioned, they've hired a consultant or cultural assessment type of contractor. And yes, we have seen that they have identified practitioners in the area that they have interviewed and talked about some of that. The commission hasn't done on our own one yet, so that would be probably something that we would be looking at, and getting guidance from Ahamoku Council to identify the what do they call the po'o or of that area, or the ahupua'a too. So yes, that we are aware of that, and that's we intend to do that as far as our procedure. Anything to add?
Thank you.
Next question now. Okay, thanks. Okay, so this is the framework. Oh, running out of time. Okay, next slide. Oh,
Sorry, Neil.
yes.
I just wanted to see what your policy was or what you plan to do going forward. We've been doing those 106 evaluations where they have to reach out to the Native Hawaiian organizations, do a letter, do a public notice, and we're noticing they're doing that separate than the kapa'akai. And it feels somewhat, the lack of coordination seems a little bit concerning to me, and I wasn't sure how to incorporate them both together, because I think to me you're trying to get at the same kind of information. Is there a concern from the Native Hawaiian organizations for either cultural practices or artifacts? Is that something anybody else is concerned with, or is it just me?
So you're talking about 106, like federal, yeah, which is 6E is the analog in state. Yeah. So we have people do both separately. One of the reasons for that is they're separate, sources of law. And then also I should stand up. They are similar. There may be overlap, but they're not exactly the same. So, for example, there may be a heiau that is in disuse or something like that. There may be valuable archaeological sites that are in disuse that don't necessarily overlap with the living practices. If someone is, gathering from those areas, that they may overlap in the same area, they may not. We want to make sure that we're doing both types of analysis. And so collapsing them or combining them is not really something that we have looked at. We have people do both a 6E consultation and a kapa'akai.
DLNR and SHPE specifically was drafting Section 6E and the administrative rules. They modeled it after Section 106 and the National Historic Preservation Act. It wasn't meant to address PASH and kapa'akai, because actually that was like before all these line of rulings. So the analysis are actually completely different. And when developers go out and do the analysis, it's actually, they typically engage two different types of consultants. One to address the SHPE compliance issues, and then what we call a cultural practitioner to do that type of analysis. And it's two separate type of analysis. Sometimes you're lucky you can have the same development team address the same issues, but most times it's very localized to that particular area.
Thank you for the question and the answers. Okay, next slide. Oh, okay. So these are more, kind of the emerging issues. So the commission, we're planning to do what we call the framework update for the Hawaii Water Plan. So this is just giving additional guidance on developing the different Hawaii Water Plan component plans. And the last one we did was in 2000. We had a framework, but a lot has changed since then. So we're updating the framework. Hopefully we'll get that completed by the end of this year. So it's going to give guidance to the plan preparers, in addition to the water code requirements and the Hawaii administrative rule requirements, a little bit more guidance on how to prepare their Hawaii Water Plan component plan. Next slide. Okay, we talked about this sustainable yield review. The USGS kind of published future estimates of future rainfall in Hawaii. So that's something we're taking a look at to reevaluate sustainable yields across the state. We've kind of just getting started. We're trying to look at Lahaina first, just because it might be urgent there. So, but we are something we are looking at. Yes. Oh, question.
Do you know if the USGS study, I guess, distinguish between like the amount of rainfall and then the rate at which the ground can take it in?
Oh,
Or I guess the recharge
yeah.
rates, just because a lot of like, I think with climate change, we're getting, a lot more intensive storms where a lot of the water just ends up in the ocean and less goes into the ground. Is that considered, in the USGS study?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when they do that's important, but they look at like I think they did like daily time steps on the rainfall. There's different ways to scale it. They do like a model for the recharge, right? And it's not only rainfall, but it's different things like land use and evapotranspiration rates and all this other kind of stuff that goes into this model. But yes, I think they look at the different climate change and stuff, right? And the effects. But yes, but it's really complicated if you want to read that. Yeah, it is. Okay, next slide. Okay, so another one. This is a well on the Big Island, and it's one of these that's come up. Some of you might have know about this, but this is another one we're working through, trying to work through it with the community and address some of the concerns about this well. So that's another work in progress. It's going on the Big Island on the west side. Next slide. Okay, so I have one slide on state agency coordination. And so with regards to, I have two little bullets for DOH, but safe drinking water branch, we work a lot with you folks over there, Dennis and his crew. And they help with our permits, so we send a lot of our permits over there for your guys' review, which they do so willingly. Thank you. And then we do data sharing. We talked about a little bit this DOH staff had just started assisting our groundwater people, and I think that's a good collaboration. We've been fortunate and thankful to receive drinking water state revolving funds from DOH Drinking Water Branch, and that's helped us with our water audit program immensely, really, and it's have so we thankful to Dennis and those guys for that. So we appreciate that. And then with the other branches, in environmental branches, we've worked with them to look at recycled water, recycled wastewater, some well abandonment kind of projects are going on that we're looking at that. And then we're a little bit involved with the cesspools, with I think that's clean water. No, that's wastewater. Yeah, Scott and Rebecca. Wastewater, yeah. So I went to a couple of their workshops. So it's interesting on what they're doing. And cesspools, how they affect wells is there's maybe some contamination. So when our groundwater people have well permits, we send it over to you guys, DOH, to review that, making sure they're on nearby cesspools. And then with the PUC, we have a MOA in place to information sharing, and so we've done that. Not so much lately, but we had meetings and we talk about it. Did you guys admin rules pass? Oh, we're okay, good. So yeah, so we're still I think we're gonna help you guys review that. Okay. Yeah, so we're doing that. That I know that project started earlier and then it got delayed a little bit. So you guys are back on it. That's good. And then so for water audit training, we invite PUC folks, consumer advocate, as well to do the water audit training, because it's important for you guys to understand that stuff when you guys are factoring that into your rate case reviews and whatnot. So and then sometimes we'll look at the dockets if PC asks us, and it's related to water source and reliability of this water source for the utility, right? And then consumer advocate, we've done data sharing with them, and we look forward to future collaboration. Okay, next slide. Okay, all right, so Carolyn asked about goals. So really briefly, so broadly speaking, in our 2019 Water Resource Protection Plan, we have really 3 really broad goals that we have objectives and projects under. But the first one is really getting more better data collection across the state and analysis, so that we need more data to help us do better resource management decisions. The second one is so we're making sure that we're balancing the water resource use with public trust protections. And we must balance this. So that's what's big overall goals, overarching goals. And then the third one is to do more collaboration and outreach, and I think that's happening here today. So that's one of the good things. And then also among the private and the community entities. So that's an overarching. And the next few slides are kind of more specific. No, next slide. Oh, maybe the next slide. So this is kind of like what I think our goals are, but the deputy can correct me. But I think we want to fill our vacancies, vacant position. Okay, and then we are kind of updating. Well, the legislature is updating our code, and we want to update our administrative rules. Again, we know more data collection, so we're partnering with the UH to do the Mesonet or Mesonet climate stations, which is a really cool project. Reevaluate sustainable yields when we can. Looking to enhance our funding, increase our funding. Sustainable funding is in our water resource protection plan, one of our goals. And then let's see. Yeah, we want to do more community involvement, participation, outreach, which I think we're getting more of, etc. And Kira, anything to add or remove?
No, I agree with all of this. I would add to this Kapaakai analysis and developing our processes for community consultation and for doing a Kapaakai analysis. That's a really important thing that we're going to be figuring out over the next year or so.
Thank you. All right. I think that might be the last slide.
So Neil, I know that up next is the PUC, and we're actually in their time slot. Do you want to? So may do it. So PUC is suggesting maybe like a 10-minute break before we start on theirs, and perhaps I know that there's a few chat questions. Maybe you could answer those chat questions, and we'll see if there's a little bit of extra time to answer some of them. So a 10-minute break. So let's come back at 2:15. So a quick reminder. So we're gonna, Carolyn and Noemi are gonna do the next section. If you have questions, if you could raise your hand. We have a couple microphones, and if we don't have a microphone when you have questions, the people online can't hear the question. And you'll notice that my voice isn't carrying through the microphone. So also be sure to speak up because the rest of the people in the room might not be able to hear you. And so with that, I will turn it over to Miss Carolyn.
I do.
Okay.
And okay, aloha. If you don't know, my name is Carolyn Laborte. I'm the chief auditor at the PUC. And before I begin, and in case I don't have time for this or I forget, I just want to thank Jackie Young in the back for, helping me prepare the presentation, monitoring our slides, and, taking care of the team's meeting. And also Roderick Simpliciano, he has been like instrumental in preparing for today and picking up our lunches. And then Andrew Okabe, he had also provided all the drinks and snacks for us today. Marcy Chang brought mochi, Mike Miyahara brought the dim sum, and then especially our commissioners and our executive director for allowing us to utilize this room and covering our lunches. Okay. Next slide. So what do? Who are we? We regulate utilities. I borrowed this slide off of one of our staff's presentations in our PUC 101 equity docket. But it shows the various industries that we regulate. And next slide. These are the industries. Energy, Hiko Miko Helco, KIUC, gas, Hawaii Gas, transportation, water carriers, Young Brothers, and Honoheke, that's the ferry between Maui and Lanai. Motor carriers. This has grown significantly since I last met with this group 11 years ago. 943 passenger carriers. Those are like the tour buses, shuttles, limousines. We don't regulate Uber. We don't regulate Lyft. We don't regulate taxi. And 526 property carriers. That's all your dump truck, general commodities trucks, low boys. There's other classifications. Then we have telecom. Hawaiian Tel is our incumbent local exchange carrier or carrier of last resort. So I think they're the only ones who still do landline and are required to. And then we have 185 wireless and wireline companies. SpaceLink, is that Elon Musk's company? Yeah, so we regulate them too. Water utilities, 37 total. Broken down, and I'll show the breakdown of just the potable water companies. And then we have the one call center. So a lot of our regulated utilities are also part of this one call center, but we also include the excavators or owners of subsurface facilities, Board of Water Supply. We don't regulate them, but they're part of this because they dig underground and they need to call our center to make sure that they're not going to hit any of the infrastructure lines in the ground. Okay, next slide. So again, to reiterate what everyone's been talking about, we have 138 safe drinking water branch potable water systems. We regulate 18, and the 18 also includes utilities that do both water and wastewater. Okay, how we differentiate who we regulate is defined by HRS 269-1. So I'm not going to read off of this, but the big thing about defining who a public utility is in the years that I've been working with the commission is that highlighted section for public use. It's not necessarily tied to whether they charge their customers, because we do have a carrier on Molokai that does not charge a certain area of their service area, the customers in that area for their, I think it's wastewater services. So there may be more water systems that could fall under our jurisdiction, but we don't usually hear from them unless they inquire with us, whether they're a public utility through an informal process or a formal declaratory ruling process. And other times, we'll hear about it when customers of that water system will complain and call our office and complain about the rates going up. At that point, our compliance section would follow up and gather more information and we'll reach out to our legal staff for assistance. Next slide. So types of water utility applications before the PUC. Again, to save time, I'm not gonna read the HRS, but 269-7 gives the commission broad investigatory powers. And you'll all get a copy of these slides too. So you can read this on your own, but I wanted to go into the next slide. So certain utility actions require approval by the PUC. The PUC will exercise its broad investigative powers to ensure that these actions are consistent with providing safe, efficient, and reliable service at just and reasonable rates. And here are some examples of the types of applications the PUC may see. So this issuance of Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, or CPCN, is when a water system comes before us to become a public utility, a regulated public utility. Then we have one of the biggest things we do is we approve applications for rate increases. We also do approval of financing agreements, expansion of service territory, and approval of sale or transfers of utility property and assets. The commission also has the power to initiate its own investigation if doing so furthers the purpose of Chapter 269. Next. So typically, a utility seeking to operate in the state must first obtain a CPCN. This authorization will be given upon showing to the PUC that the applicant is fit, willing, and able to perform the service proposed and to conform to the terms, conditions, and rules adopted by the commission, and that the proposed service is or will be required by the present or future public convenience and necessity. So it's kind of similar to the test that Safe Drinking Water Branch does when they test for financial, managerial, and technical, capability of capacity? Yeah. So we do something similar to that. Okay, next. These are the pending PUC water and wastewater rate cases before us. During COVID, the commission ordered a moratorium on disconnections. And it was during this time that the commission also advised the utilities not to file rate increases, especially when the governor's emergency proclamation was in effect. When that was lifted, we saw an influx of rate case filings. There are currently 9 pending water and wastewater rate case dockets before us. A few of them are consolidated dockets of 2 or 3 utilities. For utilities making over $2 million in revenues, there is a 9-month statutory deadline to render a final decision and order. However, by nature of the parties, and the parties being the utility themselves, the consumer advocate, and any intervener to the case, usually that period of time is extended. And for utilities making under $2 million in revenues, the statutory deadline is 6 months. Next. So I believe all of our agencies were informed of Punalu'u's situation. Punalu'u Water and Sanitation LLC, they provide both water and wastewater services on the south side of the Big Island. Our office, I know Safe Drinking Water Branch's office, were informed of a possible closing of its operations due to a lack of funds to run their system. Punalu'u operators informed Safe Drinking Water Branch, and tonight the public, mainly customers of Punalu'u, will have the opportunity to inform the commission about their request for temporary rate increase. That's going to be at 6 p.m. It will be virtual, and they are requesting to increase rates by 2,457%. Current rates were established back in 1977 at 75 cents per 1,000 gallons. So it's been a while. And information to the WebEx meeting can be found on our PUC website. So you'll see this website, and then there's going to be a link to join the meeting. So that's at 6 o'clock tonight. Next. Okay, so these are some of the reasons why water utilities file an application for a rate increase. And, you know, over the years, when I look at an application, it's usually in the beginning of the application on why they're filing their rate increase. So the triggers could be an increase in expenses, whether it be wages, energy, or inflation. Not earning its authorized rate of return, new plant investment that's now used and useful but not currently in rates, or the customer base has decreased from the last rate case, so there's now fewer customers to spread these costs of the utility. Next. So if any of the regulated water utilities appear to violate or neglect complying with the provisions of this chapter or any rule, regulation, order, or other requirement of the commission may open a proceeding to investigate the possible violation and require the public utility to correct this deficiency. Next. So receivership is one of the we have a statute, HRS 269-14.5 on this. You can read this later on your own, but I'm just going to quickly summarize. You know, in the 30 years that I've been with the commission, we came close to implementing the commission's power regarding receivership on a few occasions. So far, the solution was to increase rates to keep the utility going. However, I found that we need to have an understanding of what's involved in order to assign another entity to take over a failing system. It's not just on the PUC. Although we have the authority to appoint a receiver, it's really important to understand the regulations of Safe Drinking Water Branch and the Commission on Resource Management and work with them to ensure that the new entity is in compliance with our agency's rules and regulations. Next. Preferential rates for agricultural activities. You know, in some areas of the state, potable water may be the only source of water for agricultural purposes. So HRS 269-26.5 authorizes the commission to allow for preferential rates for agricultural activities. There is a cost to provide potable water. By allowing ag customers a preferential rate, means that every other customer subsidizes that difference in cost. So the question is, how much should that differential be? I don't know. Next. Penalties. We also have authority to assess penalties for our regulated utilities. If they're not in compliance, they're subject to a civil penalty not to exceed $25,000 for each day such violation occurs. For those that are not regulated by us but should be, that civil penalty is up to $5,000 for each offense and $5,000 per day for continued violation. Okay, next. So why is collaboration important among our agencies? With Safe Drinking Water Branch and EPA mandates that affect water utility costs, that's going to get passed down to the ratepayers. Because in the time that I've done, you know, rate cases here, we would accept any, you know, requirements from the other agencies for the utility to be in compliance. Those costs should be passed down as part of their cost of service. The other thing that we didn't get a chance to really dig into, but, you know, we're probably, I heard that Dennis wants to have a meeting with us on, is a better understanding of the state revolving fund, because it is a resource for financing at low interest rates for projects. With Commission on Water Resource Management, you know, water audits help identify areas of system inefficiency. It provides justification for capital expenditure. It'll identify what areas you need to fix, your leaks or your meters not reading properly. And it, you know, most likely defer the need for a rate increase. So if you can address your losses, then maybe you don't need to ask for more money. And then, of course, conservation of water resources is in the public interest. When I started getting more involved with the water issues, that was during the time Hermina Morita was our chair, and she had come from the legislature implementing and regulations for that. When she came here, she said, now it's full circle. I want the PUC to start concentrating on these types of issues, because back then the focus was telecom when I first started, and then energy. Energy is still a big focus, but I'm really glad that throughout the years we've had champions through our commissioners, from Mina Morita to Lorena Kiva, and now Naomi Kauai, who are really versed in the water sector. Next. So more information about the PUC can be found on our PUC website. And for our docket applications, that's the link. If you want to track a docket, you can sign up and get the filings emailed to you. And so that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I will call on Commissioner Kauai to talk about the PUC goals.
Thank you, Carolyn. So basically, if you haven't heard, my main goal and the rest of the commission is basically to get our water rules and wastewater rules promulgated. I know that the effort started right before COVID, and then there was a hiatus. And then when I came in, it just kind of stalled out. So basically, we now have a team working on updating our water and wastewater rules, taking from the last draft that was probably a lot of you have seen. I am actually trying to streamline the application processes. A lot of our water and wastewater companies are small companies of 2 to 3 people, which I don't know if you guys know that, but going before the commission, being a former attorney of these water and wastewater systems, is like pulling teeth. They're deathly afraid of going to the water commission. One, it's really expensive. The requirements are just too daunting, and it's time consuming. So we're trying to figure out ways to basically streamline the system as much as possible. So my staff has been challenged to try and figure out ways to make our process a little bit more user-friendly. And so what you're going to be seeing is hopefully a simplified version of that. Also, one of our other things that we have been working on is trying to get these smaller, or actually all of our utilities, more cognizant of resilience efforts. I didn't say, conservation or climate change, but resilience efforts. So if, especially those in the PSPS areas, how can they operate if there is no energy? I mean, water failures, we saw in California, we see it in Lahaina. How do we get them to be able to operate? And I've talked to a bunch of water companies across the nation to see how they've been dealing with it and taking note and trying to implement it in our own rules and processes. Also, you guys already heard there was a cybersecurity attack with one of our water companies, making our smaller water companies aware that they are also at risk, especially those in critical areas near federal installations. Those are the ones that are most at risk. So getting the word out regarding cybersecurity concerns and making available experts from those fields to those companies. Lastly, we are trying to modernize our system so that it's more user-friendly to our small water and wastewater companies. And we're working constantly with our CDMS partners to trying to streamline it to make it a little bit easier for the water and wastewater utility companies to access and get information. It's also basically, my hope one day is to just essentially do like almost a paper filing. If anyone has filed something with Department of Health solid waste branch, it's a very easy process. Having like You literally have a one-page application, you follow it, and you submit all the documents, and it's done. It's very easy to follow, and that's my hope for the small water and wastewater companies, something very simple along the lines of what the solid waste branch does in DOH. And so that's kind of the model that I'm hoping to follow for our small water and wastewater companies, and hopefully I'll achieve it before I term out. But that's it. Want to add anything? Okay. That's it. If you folks have any questions, ask Carolyn.
It does look like we have a question in the front. Oh, you got it.
Hi, kind of rogue thought here. So with the Lahaina wildfires, the lawsuit settlement for that was $4 billion, and I think Hawaiian Electric is responsible for paying half of that settlement, being the regulatory body of that utility company. And same goes with any kind of water utility. If there is a legal settlement involving one of the utility companies that you oversee, what's your responsibility, if any, in that process?
I can't speak and comment on things that might come before us, but but I will say that I think Hawaiian Electric Company has indicated that they are not seeking recovery of the payout. But I will add to that we do have a docket before us on their wildfire mitigation plans, and so we are reviewing that.
I know you are, but
All right, I don't see any additional questions online. There was one for Seaworm, transfer of permit. PUC oversees mergers and acquisitions of private water and sewer utilities. Do Seaworm permits need to be transferred during the utility merger or acquisition? Yep, here we go. I got it.
Hello, hello.
Oh, you got it.
Is this thing on? Oh, this sounds like it's working. Probably. Yes. Yeah, if there are relevant water use permits, then yes, those should be transferred.
As when if there's a transfer occurring in PUC, change of ownership, does the transfer also have to occur with Seaworm's permits, which I believe is correct? They do also have to transfer. And with that, I believe, Michael, you are up next. We're ahead of schedule, so we can either expand on our last topic or finish early. We'll see. Oh, I'll pass it to you. I have two. There you go.
Hi, hi everyone. My name is Michelangelo. That's my real name. I'm the executive director of Division of Consumer Advocacy. Next slide. And I'll just give what I'm going to do with this presentation is give an overview of what we do, our role in the regulatory process. So who we are, we're a state agency and division that works for you. We all pay utility bills, and we represent your interests before the Public Utilities Commission. So you can kind of think of it in a real colloquial way as the PUC is sort of the judge decider. There's a utility that comes in and makes a request, and then we act as the advocate and advocate to make sure that the interest of the ratepayers are protected. Because in a lot of instances, the utility is required and does act in their customers' interest, but they also are beholden to their shareholders. So they have different incentives, and we make sure that the incentives are also sufficiently and strongly focused on the ratepayers who pay the utility bills and pay for the utility system. So we're a team. We have, and I think this is really important, we're a multidisciplinary team because of the complexity of the issues that come before us. We have attorneys, we have engineers, and folks from the DCA, if you want to raise your hand so everybody knows who you are in the back. We're a small group, but we're a highly motivated and capable group with a wide range of expertise in a variety of areas: attorneys, engineers, social scientists, accountants, economists, analysts, and many more in a lot of cases. So when we get an application from a utility, and in the case of water, Carolyn already walked through the types of applications that come in: the CPCN, transfer of ownership, transfer of assets. We review those and see how the impacts are on ratepayers. And what we look at is, hey, how are rates impacted? Are rates going to be better? Is this a better owner who might provide better quality of service? Because we know that some of them, and this happens not infrequently on smaller water, wastewater systems, that there could be a disconnect between the incentives of the ownership and providing quality utility service. And we want to make sure that those issues arise and are focused on so that they can be addressed appropriately. Next slide, please. So the work that we do, like I was just mentioning, the overall, if you want to take a high level approach to everything that we do, it's all in the ratepayer interest, right? And the key there is making sure that utility services are delivered safely, reliably, cost effectively, equitably, and in alignment with the state's clean energy goals. So that's, if you look at the overall view and a high level approach of what we take to making sure that it's in the interest of ratepayers, that's one way that we look at it from real high level. And the types of utilities that we are regulated within the state include the investor-owned utilities, they're privately owned, and also member-owned co-ops. So you can think of something like KIUC as an example. The sectors that we operate in are the electricity, gas, water, wastewater, to a lesser extent, telecom, so like phone service. The transportation sector, so transportation between the islands on water carriers, so that would be Young Brothers and Honeheke. And we also have, within our office, we work to go out to the communities and educate the community about what it is that we do, how we advocate on consumers' behalfs. And we also, at times, act as a liaison between consumers and their utility. They don't have anywhere to go. They're not getting the answers that we need. So we have staff that will go and engage with the utility to help. Like one example is you may have a distressed customer who's facing disconnection, doesn't feel like they're getting through to the utility. They can't, and a lot of these cases are really complex. And we'll work with them to help act as a liaison and come up with a solution so that they can keep their lights on, keep their water on. We can point them to resources that help with billing assistance and help point them to resources that help lower their utility bills also on a permanent going forward basis and help with the upfront cost of the technology and things that do that. Next slide, please. So like I was mentioning, we review proposals from the regulated utility companies. So it's changing like the different types of dockets that different types of cases that come before us that I mentioned, that Carolyn did such a nice job of walking through. We provide our recommendation to the PUC, and the PUC makes the decision on the reasonableness. The PUC is looking at it from a broad public interest impact. We also look at it from the public interest, but we're also more specifically focused on the ratepayer impacts as well. And I mentioned about the billing issues, and we work to keep you informed on key issues that are being faced by consumers among the regulated utilities. Next slide, please. And then we form the public. This is sort of public outreach, how you can get involved. This is the PUC's website. You can attend PUC hearings virtually or in person, share your opinion. We really highly recommend that the public do that. And if they're willing to place it on the record, to file a public comment, that makes it really easy to reference. It's in the record, and it really helps us, our office, and the PUC understand the community's concerns. You can join the conversation. There's an energy equity docket that has a lot of important aspects of the are the right community, or are we overly burdening one community by like project siting, things of that nature, so that everybody is included in the discussion. That affordability is a key topic, that we're keeping that front of mind. Disconnections, make sure that folks are not over. There's a lot of disconnections in the state. We want to make those come down and make sure that, a lot of times it's the income constrained folks who wind up facing that disconnection, and making sure that we have processes and policies in place to constantly be iterating and improving on that, so that folks can keep critical services running, because we all know that we're captive customers as a utility. We don't have an alternative in almost, you can't really go out and build, you can, but the to go out and build your own catchment system and make sure it's clean and safe. And, people do that. But if you're hooked up to a pipe, it's much easier to turn your faucet on. And it's something, water is something we rely on, wastewater, electricity, and you don't realize how much we rely on it until you don't have it for even an hour. And some people's lives depend on things like electricity. And then last slide, please. And this is just this is our contact information. I have one more after that. If you go to the next slide. So additional resources, we also help I was mentioning earlier, point folks to resources to help with their utility bills, to help with billing assistance if they fall in hard times and they need a bridge to help get them back on their feet. We've put together a nice a one-pager so that folks, if they do run into troubles, they can go out and have this as a resource so they're not searching all over, like, how do I get bill assistance for, water? How do I get bill assistance for my electric utility? It's all there, and it tells you who to reach out to. We're a resource, can help with the utility. Hawaii Energy is a resource. They're a third party that there's a surcharge on our bill that we pay, the public benefits fee surcharge that goes to help programs like that, and that helps reduce the upfront cost of energy efficiency technology to help bring down your electricity bill on a permanent basis. Hawaiian Electric has a lot of helpful information as one example on how help with billing and payments. And the Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority, there's a green infrastructure fee, and that's to help with low income and help businesses be able to afford solar installation. And so that we pay for that, and we on our utility bills, and we want to point customers to those resources so that they are able to really have affordability solutions that work for them. So with that, I'll stop. And if anybody has any questions, happy to answer them. Okay, well, thank you very much.
So we are 15 minutes ahead of schedule. Neil, I know you had water audits. Did you want to cover that, or? Okay, kind of raise of hand if you'd like to cover water audits in the next 15 minutes, or or if you want to move on to the next topic, which was collaboration. So those in favor of wanting to do water audits right now? Those in favor of moving on to the next topic of collaboration? Oh man. Okay, so we will see if in the future water audits, it may be one of those topics moving forward.
Nick and mainly Neil, mainly Nick and a little bit Neil from our staff just did a presentation on the water audit program for the commission on March 18th, which was this Tuesday. That recording is online on YouTube. So if you are curious about our water audit program, I would highly recommend watching that recording, and you can learn a little bit more about it. Thanks.
I got two. We can pass one out. All right. So this is not what I had originally intended this meeting to be. I was originally expecting maybe 12 people and kind of a collaboration. That's not what happened, and I'm so thrilled that that's not what happened. But the last half hour I had originally planned as, is this useful to meet again in the future? And if so, what topics do we want to work on? And what would the ultimate goal of those meetings be? Is it to assist on what? And so there was some commonalities that I did hear during the meeting. And maybe if I send it to the directors of each agency, maybe, would that be something you'd be willing to do? Can I pass the mic to you, Dennis? Don't want to put you on the spot either. Okay. Is there, in your opinion, is there future collaboration topics that you would like to see occur?
Yeah, actually we sidebarred
during one of the breaks with PUC, we wanted to discuss how we could collaborate to get the funding to the systems in need. There seems to be some type of roadblock. I don't know what it is, so we just want to get to the bottom of what are those challenges that's preventing them from getting, what do we think is a good deal?
All right, so hopefully you're able to see my Word document on the, okay. So the collaboration on the funding, SRF collaboration funding.
Mm-hmm. And that could also extend out to CWORM to see what type of set aside type projects that we can start thinking about. But I don't know what Trump is going to do in the near future. So let's see what we can do. Yeah.
Maybe if we could pass the mic to Noemi.
There seems to be concerns from our sister agencies that I guess certain utilities are blaming the PUC as to why they can or cannot do things, and perhaps we need to kind of have more discussion about how to address those misconceptions. And it's disturbing that I'm getting it from two different agencies that are saying that these utilities have this perception or are representing that there are obstacles.
Anyone? Pass you the mic.
Definitely what Commissioner just said. Totally agree. Sign us up for addressing misconceptions. The other thing is we as an agency are going to be looking more into water shortage planning and planning for drought as we're seeing that become more intense and more frequent statewide. So, how do we all work together to plan for those scenarios and make sure that we're supplying clean and safe drinking water to all people who need it in the state?
So opening it up to the group as a whole. I'm sorry, Michael. Sorry.
I think there's a big second for the collaborative piece. This was extremely helpful. I mean, I was able to talk to Judy earlier. I came in, we have a public hearing tonight, and I was like, hey, we've got a challenge here with, can we get, are there ways to get some funding? And she, we already had a very productive discussion about that. And there's opportunity. So really appreciate that. And, that helps deliver solutions that we're all looking for and, unlocks that. A lot of it is finding information. Like when I mentioned the bill assistance thing, it was very helpful, I think, to customers because they're not looking around. I think the same with our agencies. If we can just pull, hey, this is where all our funding sources are and what they look at, and here's how you have to, what you need to qualify, and here's what you need to do, that can help us all point it in the right direction. Just a centralized source of knowledge, I guess, in that collaborative space. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Randy Baltimore at the PUC. Consistent with the funding topic, one of the things PUC has been talking about internally with Commissioner is looking at resiliency of the water utilities. If we can collaborate together to get the contact information so that we know who to communicate with around these initiatives, that'd be tremendously helpful.
Hi, everybody's been calling me Mike. That's my name. Used to work for Safe Drinking Water Branch. I just want to point out one thing. And because I was here 10 years ago, I think it's it's really important for us to recognize that each one of these agencies has a considerable amount of data that can be shared and leveraged at the same time. For instance, the PUC has a lot of information on water system rates and the financial background and information that supports these rates in rate cases, whereas Safe Drinking Water Branch takes a look at technical, managerial, and financial capacity. But more on the technical and managerial, we don't really have the information on the financial side of water systems. So if these two agencies were to kind of collaborate and leverage that information to help them, each agency, regulate their water systems a little bit better, have more knowledge, PUC knowing what kind of information is coming out of sanitary surveys, and Safe Drinking Water Branch knowing what kind of information is coming out of rate cases, might help each agency govern their regulated entities a little bit more efficiently and effectively, and head off those the Punaloo type situations where it's, oh my God, we're going broke, and we just found out last week. That really shouldn't happen. There should be a system of monitoring such regulated entities by both PwC and Safe Drinking Water Branch to kind of, so that there's a little bit more of a heads up, a year or two or whatever, where we can look at their technical, managerial, and financial practices and say, hey guys, maybe you guys should look at a rate case, that kind of thing. But bottom line is there's a lot of data that we can share, I think, and leverage for both agencies. And I'll include Seaworm in there too, because they collect data on pumpage and chloride levels and things like that. So yeah, just leveraging of information, how to do it.
So
I have
with
one
the-
other.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Kara Howe, utility analyst at the PUC, and I think we all saw with the fires in LA recently that the municipal water systems weren't really designed to fight such large fires, and obviously the forests in California are much larger than here, but yeah, I think there could be potential collaboration on like assessing whether there's sufficient water supply to fight potentially large fires here.
I have two things, and this might involve agencies beyond the ones that are here presently, but just the comment and questions about like disaster preparedness. Having only one day of water on Oahu is concerning to me. If there were to be like, electricity outage for a prolonged period. So that's one issue. So I think it relates to Randy's comment on resilience. And then the second one is with the push to, provide more housing. There'll probably be a lot more proposals for new residential and commercial developments, some of which may be in areas in the water management areas and groundwater management areas. So I think potentially, especially with the PUC, when there may be new public utilities being proposed or expansions of service territory, it could be helpful to collaborate with other agencies on water availability in those areas.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can you explain more about the EFC, Environmental Finance Center, that just opened up with Hawaii Community Foundation? Or
So the
anyone?
Hawaiian Community Foundation is a finance center funded through EPA. RCAC is also a finance center. So that there are different goals. And if you look at Hawaii Community Foundation's goals, and I don't want to speak for them, but a couple of their main goals was workforce development within the water and wastewater sector, and then accessing federal funds. So that was kind of their focus of the financing center. RCAC's financing center will continue to focus on, accessing USDA funds and yada, yada, yada. But, as Dennis mentioned, what's going to happen tomorrow? Don't know. Federal environment's definitely changing.
I had a question regarding in emergency situations. Which of the agencies here, or if not, is not here, is responsible in the case of an emergency where we do need to be contacting, private utilities, water interests? Does one of the agencies take the lead on that?
Melvin?
Department of Health is the designated emergency support function 3, which is public utilities and engineering. So in the event of, like, say, what happened in 2023, we were the primary contact between the public water systems in the impacted area. We contacted them daily to determine their status and what their needs were. And we funneled that up to HIEMA and eventually to FEMA, and they were sourced with to fill their needs through that function.
I know one of the concerns that occurred with the utility hazard mitigation plan, and then kind of the clarification that came out on the hazard mitigation plan, asking for that contact information. And then you had a number of utilities file a confidential case. The concern with that is once I put those numbers, the utility operator can't turn that phone number off. That's the number that gets called 24/7. And so once that number is published, there's computers that literally scan and basically eat information off the internet, and it becomes spam. And so that was the concern that you were seeing of, like, oh my God, you're publishing my emergency number that can ring 24/7, and they cannot turn that off.
Joy, is there a way to involve the wastewater branch in these discussions?
I believe John would definitely be open to that. We can certainly have a conversation with him, but at this point in time, we haven't done that. John, yeah, okay, yeah. And John was also on vacation, so yay. But that was when we originally set this up, I was focusing purely on water, but that's not to say that we can't do something similar with wastewater.
We all have clean water.
So in addition to the Safe Drinking Water branch, the SRF, there's also the Clean Water branch has their own revolving funds as well. So if there's any other suggestions I can add to this, I can list these out, ask for feedback from the group to see, was there something missed or something that came up afterwards? I can do a survey on prioritization amongst the group and say, okay, this was like priority number 1, priority number 2, and then make some suggestions on future meeting dates if that would be useful. Up in the back.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angie Kao. I just joined DCA last year, so sometimes I have some very naive ideas. So today is very informative for me. I learned a lot from other agencies that are doing similar things, looking at water utilities. So I have a very ideal idea. Just maybe one day we look at the case study like Punalu, like I can learn what other agencies has been looking at, what information they have, what data they have. Like you said, the data is out there a lot, but I don't really know specifically what I can ask requests for. And also some infrastructure has been inspected, then I don't have to look at it again. So it will be very useful if we can gather together, maybe look at a case, every agency show what they have and sharing the data. That'll be very helpful for my analysis. Thank you.
I threw out one, I added, looking at a case study, I threw out one possibility of sending this out, giving, asking for prioritization of the group and then submitting this out to a group. Any other ideas or directions that you'd like to go? That was just one idea. Sounds good. I'm seeing a lot of nodding of heads, so in the vacuum of that, I will plan on sending the emails out to the different department heads and asking for prioritization within that agency, and then bringing it back to the group and then suggesting a few dates moving forward. Yeah.
As it pertains to any dockets that are active. With respect to the case study issue, with respect to any dockets that are active before the commission, be very careful because we should not be discussing things regarding dockets active before us and should properly be in the docket.
I'm thinking of past cases that might be worth as an example one. I'm trying to think the most recent ones that have occurred. You've got Molokai Ranch, but that's kind of a giant monster. You've got Napu'u Water, which was about 20 years ago. That one might actually be okay to look at. Any others that come to mind that are in the past?
Aloha.
Go ahead.
This is Dean Harvest again. As a practitioner, I was looking at this list that you're compiling here. I was wondering if it would behold all the agencies that are involved in this conglomerate to put together their resources of what type of cultural practitioners they have to see if one holds someone that others don't have. I know, my feeling is to give you an insight. I come from the Kohuna line, and often we are referred to by other practitioners when they don't feel they can have, they don't have the mana'o or the past experience to deal with a certain event. And, so we do talk amongst each other, but it's more to have a resource list from all agencies that we can lean on each other. And that's the important part, because water is the most valued resource to the Hawaiians today. As we saw what happened at Red Hill, it drew a lot of Native Hawaiians to this source. And it's something that has been resilience throughout all the islands, no matter where we go on any island here in Hawaii. And I think if we can come up just with a list so that each other's agencies can look at and see, and then possibly tap on for their mana'o and their ike. Thank you.
Thank you. So I added that as well to the potential collaboration list. Should I look at kind of meeting dates about 2 to 3 months out? Is that what we're thinking? I'm seeing nodding heads, Mike.
for like the other agencies reviewing are you talking about the admin rules? I'm just wondering if it would be appropriate to have a collaborative meeting on those? Or is there another process in place?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry. June?
Yeah, after ledge is done.
3 months. Well, I wanted to thank you all for making the time. I definitely wanted to thank the PUC for their hospitality and hosting. I know this was a lot of work for the PUC staff. And Carolyn, I can't thank you enough for helping to put this together. With that, unless hearing nothing else, I will get this sent out pretty shortly. On time, early.